Good afternoon, everyone. This is Seth Moore again coming to you here on Anchor by Spotify. As promised, we are back and we have another podcast for you today. Currently, it is 3:43 in the afternoon, and it's a cool day here in the love state of Virginia. So we are glad that we are back with you, and hopefully we are praying that you took the opportunity to listen to the last podcast that we did and that you're better from it and that you got something from it and that you are an open entity to receive the vibratory information that you are. And in order to keep yourself on a high vibratory state of being is to continue to be that thing that you are. So again, we have some information for you today. And not only is it information, but it's an etherical essence of who you are. It is the esoteric components and substance of your molecular being and who you are. And I know that sounds real profound to some, and someone says, oh, he's trying to sound all deep and profound, but it's true. It's true. What else you want me to tell you? You want me to tell you there's something that you're not? And the only reason that you're not is because you're not allowing yourself to be who you are. Okay? And so we're going to share some things with you, and we're going to pick up on some things that where we left off. And again, mind you that this is a series. It's not something that is rushed. It's not something that I can give you in totality in one podcast. So it means that I'm going to be coming back and I'm going to be sharing more of this with you as you make yourself available and you heighten your awareness, as we often say, and bring yourself to that place of ascension. So with that being said, give us a moment and we're going to get started. Okay? So stay tuned. Okay, and we are back again here on Anchor by Spotify. This is Seth Moore coming again, sharing another podcast with you. We're going to be talking about the colostrum oil. And it's within the same parameters of what we've been discussing in terms of the sacred secret. And the sacred secret, as was mentioned before, is the secretion of that golden substance and that milky substance. And we'll get into that and we'll explain to you exactly what that is. And I know on the last podcast, the role of the female feminine energy is very important. We didn't mention that, and as reason for that is because when I said we're going to come back and give you more, all of this is inclusive in that. So if those of you who are women were probably thinking, why didn't he mention us? Well, you are a big part of this. You are actually probably one of the main components of all of this. So you're not left out by no means. And then, of course, if you know anything about spirituality, the woman has a pivotal role. The feminine energy has a greater role oftentimes than the masculine energy. But those two energies, the yin and the yang, are coalesce together, and they work in conjunction for a specific etherical nine ether function. Okay? And so we're going to be getting into this, and we're going to sharing some notes and so forth with you. And then, of course, you can, when you have the time, pick up with some of this stuff later. But let me also remind you that, and you, of course, I'm sure you already know, there's so much going on in the world now, as has always been. And if you're actually paying attention to what is happening, you can see the shift. You can actually not only see the shift and feel the shift, but you know that the shift is taking place within you, because you actually see that metamorphosis spiritually actually germinating and unfolding itself. Okay? You see it because if you are actually doing your due diligence, you see this metamorphosis spiritually and globally unfolding itself. And of course, there are energies out here that want to keep you in a carnival circus mentality where everything is just fun. Everything is fun to keep you off of what's really important. Now, what is more important than your essence? What is more important than you being prepared to exit this physical plane? To exit and remind you, as I always say, I'm not trying to get you from stopping living. That's not my goal. My goal is to keep you in awareness, so that when you're in that awareness, you're within that awareness prism, that you actually, nothing takes you by surprise. You understand? That's what being spiritually aware is. Nothing takes you by surprise, because you're within the workings spiritually of what's actually going on. So you're not like, like you're not surprised at all. You understand? Okay, so with that being said, we're going to get started. And as it says that there's much confusion regarding what I'm going to talk about, and its validity. And it talks about the sacred preservation of the inner Christos due to science surrounding the first initial stratus and so forth. And so we want you to be aware of what is actually happening. And so, again, the initial stages of the process of the colostrum oil. Okay, and we talked about that before. Okay, we talked about it. And in its secretion and how it follows and so forth and so on. Okay, so in short, the sacred secretion, it goes as follows. The lunar energy, and I will tell you what that is, because that's on the masculine part, okay, enters a star sign. And you know how people often say that, that what we call the zodiac and the star constellations. And so people say that's evil. It's not evil. See, this is where you have so much ignorance of people, where scripture talks about my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. You've been told that a lot of things are evil to keep you away from it, to keep you blind to what the truth is. And as I often say, they steal your science and they give you religion. They steal your high science and give you religion. So let me tell you something, which is not a secret. This is why a lot of times stuff that I put out, it gets suppressed. I'm not one, because I'm not a YouTuber that wants to be seen and put my face all over, stuff like that. A lot of people have this insatiable appetite because really deep down inside, people are still dealing out of ego. You know the term, you'd rather be heard and not seen. You know what I mean? Because it's better when you say something, the weight that it carries, rather than it being seen. Because eventually, by what is spoken, it will be manifested. You understand what I mean? It will be manifested. Okay? So we're talking about the lunar energy enters a star sign, resonating antennas, the biomagnetite. It's in the brain. So this is when they start talking about when Christ went to the place of skull, right? He went to the place of skull, where they call Golgotha, right? Skull means you're crowned. So when you use when you use the term heaven, I'm going to heaven. Heaven is in your crown, where that sacred oil secretes. That's heaven. Okay? So I want to give you a spiritual, esoteric understanding of when you use the word heaven. Heaven is not no atmospheric place that you are going to in the sky, as opposed to where you are going spiritually in your mind. You follow me? So this is what Christ was trying to get you to see. Okay? Spiritually. So listen up. So it picks up on the frequency and translate it into a biochemical. One, the colostrum releases its own neurotransmitter signaling to the pineal and pituitary. The pineal is the father. Remember when Jacob said he went to pineal, right? And he said, at that place, I saw God. It's in the scriptures. I believe it's Genesis 30:32. When he went to the place called pineal, he was talking about the pineal. He went to heaven because, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. He went to heaven because his pineal was open, meaning his etherical third eye was open, and he saw who? He saw God. He saw God. Okay, so the pineal is father, and the pituitary is mother. And you'll find out later on as we go along in the study that both of them is Joseph and Mary. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Then released their sacred secretion, the milk and honey. So the honey, the golden substance, is the masculine principle, and the milk is the feminine principle, meaning that the honey and the vertebrae, that secret secretion, is the masculine oil, and the milk is the feminine oil. Okay? Stay with me. Into the living waters of the body, the cerebral spinal fluid. We talked about that before. These secretions travel down to the sacrum, which is the sacred place where the Pingala and Ida emerge energies intertwine in order to birth the spinal or spiritual seed. The spiritual molecular is then pumped back up to the spine where it becomes crucified. Listen, double crossed at the optic chrism. The sacred essence then passes over aquinoid granulations, both blood and water, before entering the blood. Now this all happens in the woman. Okay, this all happens in the female principle, but it happens in the male principle as well, or the masculine and the feminine. The sacred essence then passes over the aquinoid granulations, both blood and water, before entering into the blood. From here, the Christos travels back, passing the substantia nigra, dark place, because it's dark within there, okay? And ends up at the lateral ventricle, the tomb. That's what they call the tomb, or cave, covered in a white sheet, behind which one would find the caudate nucleus, a small body during a dissection of the brain. Stay with me. Now we'll find out that cave area, which is in the solar or the lunar plexus. Here the spirit molecule rests until triggered for release by exiting of lunar energy from the resonating star sign. From the above, it can be seen that the secretion from the claustrum is indeed the start of the internal process of preservation, but it is not yet an oil. Instead, it signals the release of the biochemical which will later create the sacred oil via DMT conversion. In modern science, this secretion is referred to as somatostatin. Thus, the claustrum can rightfully maintain its title as the seat of consciousness. Okay, so, and I'm going to give you some other notes. So stay with me. We're just getting started. So now that we've talked about this sacred place and what the claustrum actually does, and we've gone over some of this before in the last podcast. So when you see, when we actually said, when you see, you know the medical sign where you see the serpents coiling around the pole, that is symbolism of the sacred secretion. See, this is what I be trying to tell y'all. They stole all of this science from our people, and they gave you religion. You understand what I'm saying? And so daily you're seeing signs and symbols right before you, and you have no idea what they even mean. You have no idea what they even mean. Just like the RX sign, when you see on your medicine bottles, all of those things that you're seeing, the signs of Shell, you know, with the logos and all of these signs that you see daily come out of Kemetic theology, that they stole the science and they're using these to say different things in the universe. You know, and the powers that be, they use these things because, trust me, they stole your science. They didn't have any. They were taught by our ancestors. See, the people that put these things out, they don't want persons like myself to say the thing. That's why they try to keep it within their power to give as many shares or likes and so forth, because this is powerful information. This is not no run-of-the-mill talking about what this person did on the sports cast, or, who this rapper's gone with, and all that nonsense. You know what I'm saying? Know thyself. Okay, so this is what they keep from you every day. This is what they hide from you in plain sight. And got our people and our children walking around blind. And I'm not saying none of us don't know this, because now there's an awakening that's taking place, that you have some young people, and I met some, who are elucidating knowledge. They know some stuff, and they not going for the okie doke. So again, there are signs that are before us every day. So we're going to move on. So I just told you about the coil like a snake at the base of the spine resides dormant the primordial energy of the universe. When awakened, it travels up the spine, carrying its full power all the way up to the summit of our brain. Now, we talked about this before. And as I mentioned before, I said, you'll hear me say things over and over again, and I might sound redundant. You know what I mean? Because I want you to get it, And so this is what happens, and I'm giving you case in point. I'm giving you what it says in the scriptures. So I'm not really deviating from what you believe. And I also want to say this too as well, that I don't want you to think that when I'm bringing this stuff forward to you, that I'm saying that there was not a literal man called Yeshua, which y'all call Jesus Christ. Okay? I never said that. I never said that there wasn't a literal. I said everything that you hear is not literal. Make the difference. I did not say there was not a literal man called Christos. But what I did say was there is an elevation, there is an ascension, and what he was trying to get you to understand and overstand was that the hope of glory in the Christ in you. Don't wait for somebody to come and save you when I'm giving you the esoteric understanding, the knowledge of who you really are. Okay, so I want to make that clear. And again, and you heard me say that everything that you hear is not literal, is in allegories, is in parables, to bring you about your higher ascension of who you really are. See, because a lot of us, man, we being robbed of who we are. We still playing, like they used to say back in the day, we playing church, playing religious games. And as I said, they steal your science and then they give you some religion. Come on. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so the rebirthing and resurrecting power within some suggests its third eye opening of the pineal gland activation of raising the presumed chrism. Okay, and so this is what the cerebral spinal fluid produced in the brain. This is what the amount of the cerebral spinal fluid in the brain. So this is where, as I just mentioned a moment ago, where when Jacob went to pineal. Why do you think they call it pineal? Because of the pineal gland. And it says that what did it say? It said that he wrestled. If I'm getting this correctly. But anyway, it said that he saw God, right? Because his pineal had opened up and his third eye opened. And through that secretion, he was able to transcend to a higher consciousness. That's all that is. It was a higher conscious revelation of his godness. He saw God. So he saw what? What did he see? He saw a reflection of himself. That's what he saw. That's what he saw. And that's what this is actually saying. That when you open up to the etherical essence of who you are, through meditation, through stripping yourself of things that are going to block and keep your pineal dormant, you know what I'm saying? Then you are ready to take on a higher essence of consciousness. And so this is what this is actually talking about. And so we went on to talk about the crown chakra, which is your head. And we talked about, well, we're actually talking about it today anyways. You know, when you say heaven, you're talking about your head. I'm going to heaven. So that means that you are raising, as we said before, your kundalini, the term that's used in the Indian pantheon. You're opening up that coiled snake as it goes up your spine to release that energy, that higher energy. Okay? So you still with me? Okay, so here we go. So we talked about the third eye opening, and the Pingala, which is connected to the pineal. Okay, the Pingala serpent, it represents what they call the nerve channel, and they call that, and we'll get into some of that. They call it the vagus nerve, and it's the vagus nerve that is connected to your brain, and that's where the fluid from that golden substance is released down your spinal, you know, and it comes back up, as we just read a moment ago, and it talks about the resurrection and all that. Okay, so there's a 2.5, and you can look at that in Colossians 2 and 5, I believe it is, where the Christos was in the ground, or in what they call in the cave, which is in the solar plex lunar area for 2.5 symbolism days. And then on the third day, which represents that secretion reaching the heaven, which is your dome, your crown chakra, your head. When it reaches that on the third day, then that experience of higher consciousness is open up, such as Jacob experienced. I saw God. You saw yourself. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, so and so the male, and we talk about the nerve channel that represents the nerve channel. The serpent represents the nerve channel, male fire, solar element, venom, and death, because there's what they call an element that takes place of death, where you're not really dying physically, but you're dying to certain things in this life. You're dying to the, how can I put it? You're dying to the animal ka. That's the best way I could put it. To the animal desires to raise your kundalini. and they say the Sushumna nerve channel, neutral zero, okay, null, and it's and it nulls the lines for balance. And it talks about the third eye, and the chakra and the pituitary ida that we went over, related to opening up the third eye. And the ida is represented as the serpent, and it represents the nerve channel again, the female principle, or the feminine principle, which is water, Luna, an element, blood, and life. And in the chakra. Okay, so moving right along. And so I believe we gave you this last time. The consciousness of man, baptism, night, and initiation. And we'll go over that, and we'll okay. So at rebirth, as your cerebral spinal fluid, the Christ climbs up the 33rd vertebrae, right? Jacob's ladder, as we talked about before, and meets the 12 cranial nerves, which are the 12 disciples, symbolically, right? We talked about that before as well. It ignites the pineal gland, which is your resurrection, called the CSF, which is the central nervous system, okay, or the CNS, which is the cerebral spinal fluid, the CSF rather, okay, and the central nervous system is the CNS. Now, they said during that time that the Essenes, which were really the Gnostics, okay, were a primitive sect of Christians. But I beg to differ with you on that. See, because they fully realized and they taught the truth. So that's why they had to flee for their lives. And that the Christ was the substance in oil or ointment contained especially in the spinal cord. Consequently, in all parts of the body, as every nerve in the body is directly or indirectly connected with the wonderful river that flows out of Eden, the upper brain. So this is where they call the river, the Jordan River, that sacred secretion of the golden oil and the milky substance, which comprises of masculine and feminine energy, the yin and the yang. That's what it is. The yin and the yang. Okay, so imagine they was teaching this back in the days of Yeshua, or Christ as you know him. Some of you know him as Yeshua. Some of you know him as Yahweh. Some of you know him as Elohim. Some of you know him as Ahawah. You know, so the list goes on, but it's the same. And you know how they say that the names have been changed to protect the innocent? But in this case, sometimes the names have been changed. It can make confusion. But this is where you have to come in and do your due diligence. So they were teaching this 2,000 years ago, this profound esoteric knowledge. And so they had to flee for their lives because those who were attempting to hijack this knowledge, which they did. To hijack this knowledge, the indigenous people who had this knowledge had to flee for their lives because they weren't accepting what the state religion was at the time because it was being changed. And they was like, nah, we're not going for that. That's not what we've been taught. They was like, that's not what we've been taught. You know, you bringing this new thing in called Jesus Christ, but the way in which it was given, this is what I'm trying to get you to understand. The way in which, and so again, I'm not knocking you. I'm just saying the way in which it was given, it was taken, and it was flipped and changed, and you getting different versions of it, brought the confusion. Because the ancients were saying, nah, that ain't how we got it. That's not what came out of Kemet. That's not what our forefathers were teaching. We was on a higher spiritual consciousness, a higher spiritual level. We wanted some high thinking. How you think the pyramids are the only wonders that are still standing today? Because we brought the concept of God to the world. We brought the concept of higher learning to the world. We brought the concept of mathematics, high science, first builders, first mathematicians. We brought the writing papers. We brought it all to the world. And it was taken and it was hijacked and it was changed. And so this is what you have to understand. You know, that you could be practicing a bastardized religion in the form of the way it's been received and changed and given to you, rather than you adopting and embracing your spiritual high self. And because you missed what was being said, because you took it all literal, instead of digesting and taking it and embracing spiritually. And it was being said to you all the time. So I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying you have to research, you have to dig, you have to study, you have to really, and you know, and we've again, when you take something and you make something out of it, because when it was given over to the indigenous person, it was already changed. They already gave you a different version, and then you take it and you do something else with it. And so now it's hard for you to change. Why? Because you have a vested interest in what you're doing. And for you to change would mean that you probably going to lose people. And you ain't going to lose people. Why? Because your livelihood's attached to it, to your prestige is attached to it, your image is attached to it. So you going like, nah, man, nah, I ain't going to do that. And see, this is where a lot of people are going to be led astray. See, because they're being led by people. And let me say this too. You have some good ministers out there. You do. And they mean well. I'm going to say this. And I know they mean well. I know in their hearts they mean well. I know in their hearts they mean to do the right thing. But aside from that, a lot of people have been given the wrong stuff. And they're feeding it to other people. And other people are digesting this stuff and don't have a clue what they're digesting. Because we're spiritual people. We're not as religious. They say we're the most religious people in the world. And it's true. But we are not the most spiritual people. And this is what we are. That's really what we are. Is a spiritual people. But a lot of us have gotten away from that. Why? Because we've been fed the okie doke. Okay, I'll move on. So again, so this substance in oil or ointment contained, especially in the spinal cord, is consequently in all the parts of the body, as every nerve in the body is directly or indirectly connected with the wonderful river that flows out of Eden and the upper brain. To water the garden, the early Christians knew that the scriptures whether written in ancient Hebrew or the Greek, were allegories, parables, or fables based on the human body, fearfully and wonderfully made. These adepts know that the secretion, gray matter, creative, which secretes from the cerebrum, was the source and cause of the physical expression called the man, and they knew that the river of Jordan was symbolized in the spinal cord, and that the Dead Sea was used to symbolize the sacred plexus at the base of the spinal column, where the Jordan spinal cord ends, typifying the entrance of the Jordan into the Dead Sea. Now, we went over that before, and we talked about the Dead Sea, where the water is. And so this is where the solar plexus and all of this takes place, in that cave area where they call the lunar, right? And so when they said it was a gray substance, that's not typically correct. It's the golden matter, okay? Because you have the golden matter, and then of course you have, as we mentioned before, the milky substance, which is the feminine principle of this whole pantheon. Okay, so it says the thick, oily, and salty substance composing the sacral plexus, the cauda or aquina, tail of the horse, may be likened unto crude, petroleum, petra, mineral, or salt, and oleum, Latin for oil, and what is that? Okay, the thinner substance, oil or ointment in the spinal cord, may be compared with coal oil, and when this oil is carried up and crosses the ida and the pingala, the two fluids, nerves that end in the cross in the medulla oblongata, where it contacts the cerebellum, Golgotha. This is where it happens. Golgotha, which y'all are familiar with. Golgotha, the place of the skull. The place of the skull. Now, what is the place of the skull? The place of the skull, again, is heaven. That's where it reaches up into the medulla oblongata, into that cerebral area, and secretes. Okay? And you get the eye-opening experience, which is called heaven. Again, I reiterate, when Jacob said, I've seen God. And when you see God, you see yourself. Or else you wouldn't be having the experience. And that happens when you open your, your third eye, right? So the place of the skull, the fluid is refined as coal oil is refined to produce, like a gasoline, a lighter or higher rate of motion that causes the ascension of the airship. Okay, so think about that. And that's a metaphor. Okay, so think about when you're at the gas pump and you're pumping that petroleum in the car, right? There has to be air. There has to be air to come through the nozzle to bring up the gas, right? So think about that happening in your brain, where that fluid, the air from your brain, that's why they say a person can expire when they don't have enough oxygen in the brain. Is that correct? I think it is. So when that airflow is happening, it brings up that substance to allow for that transmission to actually do what it needs to do as you reach that higher rate of motion that causes the ascension of the airship. You are that airship, that ascension. When the oil or ointment is crucified, to crucify means to increase in power 1,000-fold, not to kill. Did you hear me? It says to crucify is not to kill, but means to increase in power 1,000-fold, not to kill. It remains, listen now. This is I'm going to drop this. This is a heavy jewel. This is a heavy jewel. So when Jesus, and I use that word for the sake of, people to understand, Jesus was in the tomb, he was in the cave, he was in the lunar plexus, symbolically. And so when he so-called died, what he was actually experiencing was a spiritual metamorphosis. So it was being increased in power 1,000-fold, not to kill. It remains 2.5 days. Remember I mentioned earlier, 2.5 days within that prison or prison of what? The shell of the body. Doesn't mean he was dead. He was metamorphosing, having an experience. This is what I want you to get you to understand. And so, after the 2.5 days, right? The moon's period in a sign in the tomb. The tomb is what? The tomb is the cerebellum. And on the 3rd day, ascends to the pineal gland that connects the cerebellum. So you had this experience after the 3rd day, after the 3rd rising of the constellations in a certain orbit. Is that too deep for you? And then, of course, this experience of ascension takes place in the pineal gland that connects the cerebellum and the frontal lobe, corpus callosum. Okay, the limbic lobe. This is deep. This is profound. Okay, so as I said, I'm gonna go slow. I'm gonna go a little bit at a time. This is deep, y'all, and this that's happening in the corpus callosum, which is in the thalamus, and you have this operating in the optic and pituitary lobe as well. And so I'm gonna skip that. We're gonna come back to that. That's that. So it's some really heavy stuff that's taking place. Okay, and so we talked about the cerebellum, and on the 3rd day, this ascension takes place. And I'm going to come back to this. And as I said before, we'll be going back and forth. We'll be skipping some things, and we'll be coming back. But then it talks about with the optic thalamus, the central eye in the throne of God, that is the chamber overstopped by the hollowed, caused by the curve of the cerebellum, the most high of the body, which is the temple of having God, or the temple of the living God, I'm sorry. The living vital substance, which is the precipitation of the breath of life breathed into man, therefore the holy, or the whole, WHOLE, the whole ghost, or breath, or the Holy Ghost, or the breath. So the pineal gland is the pinnacle of the temple. The modus operandi by which the oil of the spinal cord reaches the pineal gland is described in what follows. So that's the holy place. Okay? And that's when they say there is no name. Listen, I'm gonna finish up here and we'll come back. But there is no name under heaven, under your head. Listen, under heaven is your head. There's no name which by ye may be saved, except you say Jesus Christ and him. So it's about you. It's about you understanding your Christness. And the correct rendering of the Greek, okay, every 29 and 1/2 days, when the moon is in the sign of the zodiac that the sun was in at the birth of the native, there is the seed or psycho-physical germ born in the out of the solar plexus. Remember we were talking about the manger? So we talked about the solar plexus, that's within that cave area. The manger is where that seed is actually born. And the seed is the taking up by the nerves or branches of the fuma gastric nerve and becomes the fruit of the tree of life. I'm going to stop there. This is just too deep. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And we're going to come back and we're going to continue. So I hope that you really got something out of this. I hope that that you're opening up to this. This is profound, y'all. And I told you. And I have a lot more. I have notes. I have a lot more. We ain't nowhere near through yet. Because I want you to get this, because this is really profound. And so we're going to stop for now. But until next time, it's Seth Moore again, coming to you here on Anchor by Spotify. Make sure and remember to keep your vibrations high and to know thyself. Until next time, remember, we're always listening to Scott Blucky and his orchestra. We'll see you on the next podcast. All right, take care.